T. Liggins, Hurt a Life Coach, coming in for another recap and discussion series. Recap and discussion conversation about the For Life ABC series that's aired Tuesday nights. It's a drama about that's based in a real life story of a guy named Isaac Wright Jr., who was convicted of life in prison, then became a prison lawyer, an attorney. He passed the bar in Virginia, I believe it is, and then got the reciprocity in New York, became a prison rep, started litigating the cases of other inmates, ultimately to build his own credibility, his own stock, that he would one day in turn be able to really overturn his own retrial and possible release. It's interesting to continue to go on this journey with Aaron Wallace with the hope and with the belief that this thing is possible, that someone who's convicted of life in prison would actually ever get out. It's really hard to fathom at times, or even just to accept the fact that people are wrongfully convicted, that we don't get it right all the time. And that shouldn't be such a surprise, because we're human beings. And even though it's a system, even though, we are do our very best, we are flawed by nature. And so we can't create anything that's perfect. And so there's going to be those flaws, there's going to be those discrepancies. And we need to be able to have a mindset that's critical, and that it's okay to pursue those cracks, those crevices, those weak spots, in order to just reinforce, fortify the system, that it can do what we would like to think that it was designed to do, which was justice. But what we've history and through history is that we're getting a different type of outcome from this criminal justice system, and some of us question its design entirely. Whole another conversation piece. I'm just saying that it's really respectful, admirable, and not so far-fetched to really walk alongside of Aaron Wallace in this journey as he looks to overturn his conviction. So this is about week 8 of the series. There's been a lot that's going on. I believe this is a 12-week series that it's happening, and there's a lot that has occurred. There's a lot that's gone on. There's so many dynamics that we've been able to cover for these 8 weeks. The intention of the program that we're doing, of course, you guys are on the Hurt a Life Coach page, but what we believe is in criminal justice education and reform and community correction, and providing support for individuals upon their release from institutional correction. Justice reform from the sake of looking at law enforcement and courts too, but really we take a focus on can we provide the best support for people when they leave incarceration, and then what type of things are actually going on while they're away. So this episode, this series, again, does a great job of just highlighting some of the flaws and discrepancies that we see in courts and in correction. And then this program airs every Tuesday after the show to have that discussion, to open it up, to have a dialogue, to interact as a community, to just work through these things. Me, myself, I have my own personal story with the criminal justice system. As a juvenile, now even today, for the last 4 years, I've been providing reintegration support incarcerated. So this is a very personal place, professional as well. And so I offer myself as a guide, as a light, to kind of deep dive into some of these the things about the system that may not be so common to others. So with that, let's go ahead and get into what was going on in this week's episode. What I noticed right away from the front, atop of the episode, and it really stuck right out to me. I don't know if they said it or if I just felt it, but there's something about that moral clarity. And I think it was said by the guy that helps out Aaron Wallace a lot. But moral clarity and morality is important. It is a standard. It is a measure when I'm doing work, character work with people, particularly the population I work with. I look at legal, moral, and ethical. And morality is something that ought to guide our decision making and our behavior on a more regular basis. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about morality and what is the moral good in it. And when you start to do that, what you'll experience is this wrestling in the mind of what is right. Am I doing it right? What are my motivations? How does this achieve and accomplish like balance or harmony in the world? Is this completely self? Is there a win-win in the situation for other people I'm engaged with? How is this harmonious? Is it causing harm? You ask all these type of questions when you start really living your life through a lens of moral measure as well. And I really appreciate the fact that this series, this story about the right now, but he's the guy who helps out Aaron Wallace, who I found out in this episode was a former state senator, which is pretty interesting. But what you see is this turning and this transformation of character when you start thinking about the moral good. And so it was wonderful to see that this series moved into that and giving us the opportunity to look into the concept of morality and moral good. So I appreciate that. And as you see in the episode, it really unfolds and you can see where, his attempt at, making things right, making amends, achieving balance again, actually achieving justice, going through the system, asking for favors and working his reputation or working his relationships to really keep down the field to achieve the moral good. You've seen that he went and asked a warden for a favor. He asked a warden to transfer a inmate who was at another institution so he could be closer to Aaron Wallace and Aaron Wallace could ask. You see that he went to visit an old who mine had a steel trap and had some information about the officer he was trying to track down. He went to an old dusky bar and ran into a brick wall there. Didn't ultimately get what he was looking for, but then ultimately found himself to the widow of the man that he was looking for. But it was real, and she turned over to him all the case files, and she mentioned to him that because her husband was attempting to do good, that he was actually forced out, and she asked him to go and make it right. And so the episode kind of ends with him talking about, that process that he went through to establish in the pursuit of that moral good. And I just really was inspired by that. And I really believe in the importance of having that conversation with ourselves about the morality of the decisions that we make as well. Not just the legal and the ethical, but also the morality. Moving through some more, there was a lot going on. Even again with that gentleman, he talked about in his funk back in the day that he was a drunk and a coward. Tough to own those things, own those identities. Really wonderful to see now that he's, living a life in recovery, doing the whole AA thing, it seems like, and just really recognizing that he's a better person without alcohol. And being courageous instead of cowardice. So it was really good to see that there. He's encouraging Aaron Wallace to do something personally risky and professionally stupid. I thought that was interesting to hear that shaped and framed in that way. But again, that's just kind of all wrapped around and into whether or not what's driving you to take some of these risky behaviors, risky things for Aaron Wallace and for his partner. Part of what was going on today too was the whole situation around Cassius 50 Cent, and being the fight that happened in the shower, whether or not it was self-defense or not. And two is Cassius was very aware that even in that incident, the warden was ready to, you know, give him a stern talking to, but then he was like, am I hearing? I get a hearing, right? And you can always see in the micro expressions when you pick up, you can see that the warden is aware that this guy's smarter than what he looks like or what you would think for a normal inmate. Sometimes, a lot of times, if not all the time, people in prison aren't perceived as the smartest or the wisest. They're really kind of perceived as not smart and things like that. But you can see Cassius is really exemplifying some intelligence, and he continues to do that through the rest of the episode. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but let me get back to his knowing that he was entitled to a hearing. And that caused me to think of the criminal justice precept or concept called due process. So due process is this criminal justice concept, value, core principle that says everyone has a right to be heard. Everyone has a right to be tried. Everyone has a right to cross-examine an user. Remain silent, but you just have a right to innocent until proven guilty. Essentially, due process is these hearings and appearances and activities that happen in the courts that ensures that you are first innocent until proven guilty. That's called due process. And so the interesting thing is that even while in custody, in jail or prison, federal prison, state prison, you still are entitled to due process. And it's interesting because the internal, courts, if you will, when it comes to correction, you've seen what it looked like. It's a little different. They're not judges. It's overseen by, another correction officer, or the warden may be a part of that. You see the prison rep, stuff like that. But they're still entitled to that due process. I would like to sit here and say that, the due process under the law in the courts and in the corrections are just killing it. But I cannot say that. Obviously, I just talked about the top of this live stream. We've got people that get their full due process, and still we end up convicting people that were innocent. And really breaks my heart about due process per se in corrections is sometimes people are actually assaulted. Prisons and jails, prisons particularly, sexually assaulted. They claim and they report violence against them, and they have due process that they're entitled to, and oftentimes it just falls on deaf ears. And that's why actually it was implemented. It's called PREA, the Prison Rape Elimination Act. It is in place in all, federal institutions and things like that. I believe state prisons as well, for sure. But the due process ain't always so smooth. It's just as suspect and wonky as it is in the regular courts. But entitled to due process. But I thought I'd just maybe talk a little bit about due process in that way, really, which is the right to again cross-examine you want to, but due process under law, everyone's entitled to due process. Lawyer and leverage. It's interesting too. Another thing I found that was fascinating is this, the wardens or attorney general. And for a while, we've noticed a tension between the warden and her wife, and the warden's been more wife who's running for attorney general, maybe not so much, maybe a little more conservative. And they've had this tension between them two. But now it seems that now pivoting and open to running as a progressive. Her team says, I think you're panicking, and open to being she talked about, well, in the episode, she went into the prison, spoke to 47,000, not in that one incident, but she people being confined. But she went in to kind of hear from them, kind of do a focus group type of format. And I just thought it would be a good thing to talk about too, the importance of the Attorney General. So the Attorney General is actually an elected position. It's not something that most people are aware of. I wasn't that fully aware of it until a few years ago when I started doing some work with a nonprofit in the area around the concept of smart justice. Just like you would elect your mayor, or you would elect city council members, you elect your president, you elect, state legislators and senators and House of Representatives and U.S. Congress. Your attorney general, state's attorney is another one, but your attorney general is an elected official. We have the power through our votes to be able to determine who sits in that seat. The attorney general essentially is the law enforcement, for the state. The highest ranking law enforcement official. So all of the sheriffs and cops and police departments and things like that, they all fall under the authority of the attorney general. And oftentimes we let that position go under the radar, and we aren't holding ourselves accountable enough to actually doing the research and vetting who we would have in that position, and really holding them accountable to the principles and things that we believe in as far as what it should have looked like when it comes to law enforcement. Some people definitely have the mindset that we need to be tough on crime. And some people have the mindset that we need to be, seizing drugs and seizing guns and all those things. And I believe it too. Safety is definitely important, but I'm not certain I prescribe to tough on crime. Again, I'm looking for a representative who's willing to be smart when we're actually looking at how are we engaging individuals that are interacting with the criminal justice system. Because if we continue to be desensitized to the individuals and families, we'll continue to cause families to break up, people to be harmed. I really feel like the guy at the end, the guy who helps out Aaron Wallace, who I was talking about at the top of this episode, in the end of the episode, he talks about communities being shattered and people who were broken because of kind of the insensitivity that we have been practicing as criminal justice professionals. And so I do believe off a little bit and not focus so much on being hard, being tough and punishing crime, but to be smart on crime. Look at counseling and treatment services, look at mental health support and things as well. But attorney general is something that we have a power to engage with our vote. They're an elected official. A lot of dynamics going on between the warden and Cassius, the new inmate, Cassius and Aaron, the prison rep, and also Aaron, the warden. Just a lot of different dynamics to keep up with. There's a lot of power and control going on. Obviously, the warden being the superintendent of the institution, but still also being accountable and need to also adhere to rules, regulations. And, Aaron's like, hey, I'm just being a prison rep. I'm just representing my client. But she got a sense that there was more to it than just that. And there was a moment there in interaction where she said, what does he have on you? She got a lot of times we just put our mask on, we get in our position, we get in our roles, and we just operate within those policies, those procedures, and those protocols. And we get that on the other side of that position as a person. And whenever we just really allow ourselves to check in with that person, it's really not so surprising to me anymore. That's really my preferred approach versus position-centered and things of that sort. But she says, "What does he have on you?" And he kind of shifted off and shook it off a little bit. Similar approach to Captain. I think that was probably one of the most powerful parts of her. We got a chance to see that the Captain is a human being too, and somehow he has found himself further in than he expected to be, wanted to be, or needed to be. And Aaron Wallace said, "Man, what happened? How did you get here?" And he teared up, and he was like, "Man, I don't even know. I don't know how I got here." But it was a moment where he was standing, and the captain was still in control. It started to escalate a little bit, and Aaron leveled with him. That was a nonverbal cue. He got down on his level, looked him in the eyes, and said, "How did you get here? How did you get here?" He got the emotion. I really believe in a person-centered type of interaction with people, to be more person-centered in our interaction, all of our interactions, in all of our roles, whether it's professional or personal. There's people that we're interacting with. Try to see the person. And in this episode where there was a person-centeredness, or at least a perception-centeredness, at the end of the episode, the warden's wife, the one who's running for attorney general, supported her competitor, and the warden felt like the wife had come full circle and was really personally supporting ideals. And then when she walked away, she team thinks it's a good idea anyway, so have at it. And then you can see the sense of disappointment that was present, because she was under the impression that her wife was supporting her because it was her idea, not because it was good for her team. So it was a missed cue for empathy in that piece. So a little bit about that dynamic and person-centeredness when Aaron seen it in the captain, and then at a moment, but it really didn't land. There's also some stuff that's coming out and coming to surface about the divorce. I thought it was interesting to see Aaron tearing down the pictures, or not tearing them down, just bringing them down. But I talked about that in the last live, about how time stands and how people in prison stay in a time with those pictures, but life is still moving on outside of prison. But when he signed the divorce papers, he started to bring those things down. It was really interesting to see all of the divorce unfold. Kids of prisoners are very intuitive. His daughter Jasmine is just really, you become so in tune and such a sharp listener, and so much just from having a parent who's incarcerated. And so she pressured her dad, and I just was reminded on how much, and I've talked about this throughout this recap program, about how much that daughter Jasmine is going through. Aaron and Cassius had an exchange episode, and it was really what it brought to light was a convict mentality. And says, or Cassius said, "In here I'm somebody. Out there I was nothing. In here I'm somebody." And then Aaron's like, "Man, you tasted freedom before." He's like, "Yeah, I did, and it was bitter." And he's like, "Man, well, you must not have like wife or kids or anything like that." And then Cassius says, Cassius says something along the lines of, it's a shame that you don't see your full potential. Um, and Aaron says, man, that's a convict mentality. He says, I think Cassius says, it's a pity that you don't see your full potential, that you don't see yourself beyond these walls. And there was a dynamic that became present there in between Aaron, who has a wife and children, and just want to do everything to get out, and Cassius, who does everything. Fear of going out into community because of how many challenges and how many barriers are out there. How hard it is to be somebody once you have a criminal history, once you have some of these conditions that work against you. Sometimes for many people, they say it's easy. And so they have this convict mentality where it's all about just, what's my prison reputation? Things are predictable, and that's just what they want. And it's my full-time job trying to unwire that for individuals who are released because they still have that institutional mentality. But it's a tough balance between that convict mentality and what it takes to actually succeed and live outside with your freedom. It's sad to hear Cassius say freedom is bitter. That's a gut check to community, us, me, the rest of us, that, when people are released from prison and jail, how are we doing in their homecoming? Do they not just because they made a poor choice to deserve? Should we not provide them with support services and help them to reintegrate? Because it seems as if some people have the mentality of, it's better for me to just stay in prison than to go back out there where people don't care about me. There was another part in there where when the captain was kind of called out about the phone bank and stuff, and she said, read that seal, supervision. And it's important that we think about the community supervision piece, because mostly everyone in this institution is going to be released back to the community. And in fact, 97% of individuals who are in prisons will be released in a lifetime. 97%. 97% individuals who are in prison will be released back into the community within their lifetime. So what are we doing on the inside to prepare them for their release? How are we ensuring that they're remaining connected to community and to family? The phones is one of those. Visitations is another. Education program is something we can do to help prepare people for that community supervision piece. And that's the part where I get most lined up and fired up about, is providing that reintegration support upon their release. There were some comments about using violence to enforce a social code, a norm in prison. Enforce a social code. And Aaron Wallace insinuated that while Bill would do something like that, Cassius continues to show that type of belief. And that belief carried out on the outside leads to more recidivism. So it's so difficult that the prison culture is wired and set up to use violence as a means of influence, here as a leadership style. It's tough to know that that's a reality. It was interesting to hear Aaron just call that out. Even Cash is using that violence on the captain in a very peculiar place. Compromised where, to the point where he lied. This was a part of the show that, it really showed how that use of violence can cause things to be different, and the flipped, and he added testimony to his incident report. He lied. He was unethical. It was immoral. It was honest. All my least favorite things. All my least favorite things. But that came as a byproduct of using violence and threat. And like I talked about, I think last week, almost not in the same sense, fruit, but really, I mean, it's starting off foul and ill with violence, and it's not going to get any better when you're starting off with that type of approach. So it started off with violence and racism and all these things, and it just ended with the captain having to lie under oath, unethical, immoral, dishonest, all my least favorite things. I'll end with this. The other stuff I wrote down here. Um, I wrote down Cash gave his phone back to Aaron Wallace. And it really just, again, it really speaks to the ingenuity and the genius almost of some of these individuals who are away in prison and jail. They're chess players. They really think methodically. They think systematically. They have so much potential, so much value, so much skill that could be used in a different way. But in chess, you're always 2 or 3 steps ahead of your competitor. And it seemed like what was said was Aaron Wallace, like, the whole time. As soon as you got here, you knew you needed to get some leverage on me because you were gonna, do a couple of attacks like that. He did the thing in the cafeteria. He did it hour. He did the thing with the heat, the getting the guy burned. He had to enforce his will, make his presence be known, to get his prison reputation up. And then he gave the guy back, knowing that he needed that type of leverage to get him to come and work for him. So interesting to see Cassius just doing the head type of chess mentality. It just inspires me to try to help people like him to use those skills in a way. Um, I'll get the guy's name for next time. The guy who helps out Aaron Wallace a lot. He said it almost idea of doing something good that drives us to doing bad things at times. So we really just got to hit the brake, y'all. We got to hit the brakes and make sure that we're doing the right thing the right way. That we don't allow ourselves to compromise our morality, our ethics, our integrity. Do good. He's like, some people just think we need to tear it down and start over from scratch. I always chuckle because I have a few friends that truly believe that. There's a subset of prison reform professionals and they believe in just tearing it down, burning it down, starting over. I always chuckle because approach to this problem, but I also can empathize and understand why they feel that way. Because when it seems like you make a tweak here, you make a tweak there, you make a tweak here, you make there, you still got this thing that's running out of control and just not functioning right. What we need to do is just burn it down, was what they say. Yeah, I always chuckle, but I think it definitely speaks to the severity of the problem that we have, that some people really do believe that we just need to start all the way over from scratch. So interesting to hear him talk about that. Interesting to hear the episode series unveil that and say, start all over, because maybe that is what we need to do. I don't know if that's completely possible. I don't think we could just dump out all of the inmates that are currently incarcerated and start over. But kind of with this COVID-19 thing, there's a call to that type of action right now, because just because people are convicted criminals or currently doing their time don't mean they should be just dying because of this COVID-19 thing. So there is some people that are being released, and some calls to accountability to have people released for some of the things that are happening due to the health crisis that's happening inside of our correctional system. So it's been good. We all fascinating, it's so interesting and intriguing to really just have this conversation, walk through this conversation with people who care about the work that we're doing in our criminal justice system. I'm going to continue to be an advocate for this type of conversation, dialogue in the community. I'm always open to coming in and having conversations with our law enforcement officers, courts, corrections, social workers, you name it. I just want to be a resource for the state of South Dakota here where I'm at to continue to do this work. We're going to do it again next week. For Life, the episode series airs ABC every Tuesday, 9 o'clock, then 10 o'clock here on the Hurdle Life page. I go live and I talk about what I've seen, and we start to just unpack and unfold some of the things that we're seeing inside of the criminal justice system and ways that we can move the needle and just do a little bit better than what we're doing right now. So I think that's my time. Thanks for those who did chime in and hang out with me. I seen one of my dear friends from way back in the day, Mr. Madsen. Amanda, thank you for joining. Mr. Seiler, thank you to have you come in and check out some of the things that I've done prior weeks before, but also next week I'll be doing this again. Thank you for all your work as a public servant. Such an honor. We're going to do it again next week, you guys. Appreciate your support. Hurdle Life. I'll see you next week.